Hello again. Hope you're having a wonderful day. We are reading in the book of Mark, and we're ready to read chapter 3. Now remember, we're reading for, the context. We're trying to understand the events and learn what we can from those events. We want to pay attention to what's being said and apply that to us whenever it is applicable. That's probably a good way to say that, even though it's kind of redundant using apply and applicable. So anyway, you get the idea. So we're here and ready to read chapter 3, but I want to call your attention to the point Jesus had just made in chapter 2, that the Son of Man was Lord of the Sabbath, and the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. That was his point, and it's an important point to remember and to remind ourselves of that. So here we go in chapter 3, because this is still something that's going to come up. That's why I mentioned that. Chapter 3, verse 1, and this is the book of Mark, okay? Again, he entered the synagogue, Jesus, and a man was there with a withered hand, and they watched Jesus to see whether he would heal him on the Sabbath. Now, this was the Pharisees again watching Jesus, so that they might accuse him. And he said to the man with the withered hand, "Come here." And he said to them, to the Pharisees, "Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm, to save life or to kill?" But they were silent. And he looked around at them with anger, grieved at the hardness of their heart, and said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. The Pharisees went out immediately held counsel with the Herodians against him, how to destroy him. Because he was making a point to them. Is it lawful? Is it to do good or to do harm? To save a life or to kill? Well, if you read the old law, it's always wrong to do harm. It's always wrong to kill. But it's not wrong to do good. And he was making a point that it went against their letter of the law and the way they looked at things and their mentality. So they were offended, and I think they felt like he was causing them problems. Because you got to remember, his fame had already grown. So they felt he was a threat. Otherwise, they probably would have ignored him to begin with. So let's see, verse 7, Jesus withdrew with his disciples to the sea, and a great crowd followed from Galilee and Judea, and Jerusalem, and Idumea, and from beyond the Jordan, and from around Tyre and Sidon. When the great crowd heard all that he was doing, they came to him. Pardon me, I had to have a little something to drink there. Okay. When the great crowd heard all that he was doing, they came to him, and he told his disciples to have a boat ready for him because of the crowd, lest they crush him. For he had healed many, so that all who had diseases pressed around him to touch him. They knew that he would heal them. They knew if they just touched him that it would heal them. So this is, let's see. There. So this was something that Jesus did all the time, and they knew that. That's part of the reason his fame had grown. And when the unclean spirits saw him, they fell down before him and cried out, "You are the Son of God." And he strictly ordered them not to make him known. Pardon me, I'm very sorry for that. Sometimes you're doing something, you're trying to read and talk and do your best, and you still have to stifle a yawn, or you've got to have something to drink so you don't cough. We are beset with these human frailties, All right. So we're ready for verse 13 here. Though, well, maybe we should mention here, you'll notice the great crowd followed him. They heard all that he was doing. Well, what was he doing? He was healing people. He was casting out demons. He was teaching them and telling them things that they didn't know. And he was teaching differently than the scribes and the Pharisees and the Sadducees. So it was getting their attention, just like John had gotten their attention before. And these unclean spirits, they fell down before him and cried out, "You are the Son of God." Well, he's ordering them not to make him known because it's not supposed to be broadcast out there yet. He knew his time was not yet come. All right. So verse 13. And he went up on the mountain and called to him those whom he desired, and they came to him. And he appointed 12, whom he also named apostles, so that they might be with him, and he might send them out to preach. Now, apostle is someone who is sent. Now, we always take that, and I always take it this way. An apostle is someone sent from God or sent from the Lord. But that is definitely more, strictly speaking, a Christian definition. Apostle, if I remember correctly, it comes from a Greek word which just means someone who is sent. But for us, we take this as being the apostles being sent from God, sent from Jesus, the Lord. So, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm just stating that so you have a clear idea that apostle is someone who is sent. Comes from a word that means someone who is sent, and we give it that connotation, especially in light of the apostles we always talk about. I think it's pretty exclusive. We talk about the apostles of Jesus, the 12 apostles. So, all right. So, and he appointed 12, whom he also named apostles, so that they might be with him, and he taught, and he might send them out to preach. I'm sorry, I misread that. And have authority to cast out demons. He appointed the 12, Simon, to whom he gave the name Peter, James, the son of Zebedee, and John, the brother of James, to whom he gave the name Boanerges. I really don't know, and I apologize. But they are the sons of thunder. Andrew and Philip and Bartholomew and Matthew and Thomas and James the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus and Simon the Canaanian. I don't know why they don't say Canaanite, but they say Canaanian, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. Then he went home, and the crowd gathered again, so that they could not even eat. Pardon me, I got to move the screen a little bit here because I kind of messed that up. So that they could not even eat. Verse 21, and when his family heard it, they went out to seize him, for they were saying, he is out of his mind. See, his own family did not understand, which is kind of funny to think about. I mean, I know it's not like hilarious funny, but it's so hard for your family to accept you as anything but what they remember. Like, even though he may have been like the perfect son growing up, they still remember him as a child or as a teenager, and even if he was perfect and always doing good and right things, they still wouldn't think of him necessarily as being the Messiah. It would be hard. It would be hard for you to think of someone you had grown up with as your brother, that they were the Messiah. Okay, it would be a difficult thing. Just think about that. And I think that was a problem here with his family, and later when he went back to his hometown and he couldn't do, they didn't have much faith in him, they didn't really believe. And again, that's because they had seen him, he had been around, they were too familiar with him. For some reason that somehow prevented them, and it's a thing with people that it makes it harder for us. I think your family has a harder time. Like if you're a preacher or something, I think your family probably has a little harder time dealing with that than you do. Anyway, that's just a thought, food for thought. So verse 22, and the scribes who came down from Jerusalem were saying, he is possessed by Beelzebul, or Beelzebub in, let's see, does it say that here? Yeah, Beelzebub on the screen. And by the prince of demons, he casts out the demons. So they're saying that basically Satan has given him the power to do this. And Jesus, he called them to him and said to them in parables, how can Satan cast out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. And if a house is divided against itself, that house will not be able to stand. And if Satan has risen up against himself and is divided, he cannot stand, but is coming to an end. But no one can enter a strong man's house and plunder his goods unless he first binds the strong man. Then indeed he may plunder his house. Well, there's several things here. First of all, Jesus is making the point. Sometimes when my mouth is getting dry, I slur things a little. That's why I keep trying to drink something. Anyway, well, of course, Satan does not cast out Satan. Demons do not cast out demons. A kingdom divided itself against itself is not going to be able to stand. Well, of course not. He's telling them that's nonsense. That doesn't make sense that Satan would do that. Of course Satan wouldn't do that. Satan would want people to be possessed and obsessed and everything else, all the bad things you can think of. And he's not going to come along and help heal them and clear that up. Then Jesus gets into, but no one can enter a strong man's house and plunder his goods unless he first binds the strong man. Then indeed he may plunder his house. That is a reference to, at this time, before Jesus has died and risen again, Satan is really the ruler of the world. He's really in control of things. It's his house, kind of, that was the problem with Adam and Eve when they decided to listen to Satan instead of God. They decided to basically bow down to Satan. Now, I'm saying this, it may not have truly been a physical manifestation of them bowing down, but I mean, in choosing to listen to Satan over God, as if God had lied to them. Do you understand the implication there? They basically made Satan their God. Even, and the woman was deceived, but Adam wasn't, and they chose to do that, and that gave Satan power over them. So Jesus is talking about entering the strong man's house and plundering his goods, but first he has to bind the strong man. Well, that's what he's here to do. Satan is the strong man, and Jesus is here to to basically bind him, basically to take his power away so that then he can plunder the house. Well, what's he after? He's after men's souls. He's after us. He's after people to save them, and that's the goods he's saving. So and that's what Jesus is here to do. That's the plan. They didn't understand it at the time, and I've read this plenty of times when I was younger, and I had a hard time understanding this. I didn't really get it. But more over time, I've come to understand it, and that's just what it takes. You just have to read and study more and try to understand. So, verse 28, Jesus is still talking. Truly, I say to you, all sins will be forgiven the children of man, and whatever blasphemies they utter. But whoever blasphemes against the Holy Spirit never has forgiveness, but is guilty of an eternal sin. For they had said he has an unclean spirit. So they're basically saying that he did not have the Holy Spirit, that he has an unclean spirit. You have to understand that the Pharisees, at least, and it's mentioned in Matthew, and I think it's mentioned again, either if not in Mark and one of the other Gospels, they knew he was from God, and they were doing this, they were planning to destroy him and kill him anyway. They knew he was from God. They knew there was no way he could do those miracles unless he was from God, but they wanted to get rid of him because they felt he challenged their power and authority, and they wanted to keep their power and authority, and they chose that over believing and repenting and following. So, in verse 31, And his mother and his brothers came, and standing, I did not change the screen. I apologize. Now let me fix that here. All right, so verse 31, and his mother and his brothers came, and standing outside, they sent to him and called him, and a crowd was sitting around him. And they said to him, your mother and your brothers are outside seeking you. And he answered them, who are my mother and my brothers? And looking about at those who sat around him, he said, here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does the will of God, he is my brother and sister and mother. And Jesus was making a good point here. We are, whoever does the will of God, he is my brother and sister and mother. We are kin. We are siblings with Jesus, as a part of the church, as being saved through baptism and the forgiveness of sins. We are brothers of Christ and sisters of Christ, and we get to all be children of God. We're all part of the same family, and that's a strong point, and it's something to really think about and imagine. Excuse me. John mentions that very early on in his gospel as well. So Jesus is making the point. It's not that he didn't necessarily care about his mother and brothers, but he was making the point that we're all the family of God. We're all God's children, and we're all brothers and sisters under God and Jesus. So, all right. So that has been chapter 3. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening, sorry. And if you have any comments or questions or anything, please put that below. Hope you have a wonderful day, and God bless you.